Assalamu alaikum, dear students. We are continuing our discussion on culture. We have defined culture as, uh, first of all, as a complex whole which includes art, belief, customs, law, the overall way of life. And we also define culture as everything which is socially learned and shared by the members of society. And we discussed that the concept of culture is basically used in contrast with nature. So, when man started developing his own environment, his own, for example, place to live, and he changed the cave and put some stones and make a door, for example, and when he cooked the meat, for example, on fire. So this was the beginning of culture. Or when he uttered a word and started speaking a language, and language developed. Language is perhaps the most important part of culture. The way we communicate, we are able to say people whatever is in our consciousness, whatever is in our heart, and then we developed a way to write those voices, those sounds, script, written language. So language basically give a particular shape to culture in the sense that it, because of one generation, its experiences were written or they were spoken and they were transmitted to the next generation. So culture is a kind of heritage. We can think of culture as a heritage of whatever we have felt, whatever we are doing. So all our feelings and activities, so all that basically is culture, and they are passed from one generation to the other generation, and so on and so forth. So culture includes ideas and what we think, patterns of thought, and social patterns, uh, rituals and customs. But it also includes things. Sofa set, for example, chairs, this board, this marker, for example, the clock, and the air conditioner, for example, and the refrigerator. All these things are also part of culture. So we have two aspects of culture. We can say one is non-material culture or symbolic culture, you can say symbolic culture, and the other is material aspect of culture, material culture. So ideas and values and patterns of thought and patterns of doing things, they are material culture. And things, physical things, cultural artifacts, utensils and furniture and jewelry, that is all material culture. Which one is more important? One can say that material culture is important because, let me give you an example. In, for example, in football, in the game of football, football itself is material culture. And what is non-material culture? The rules of the game and the techniques of the game. That would be non-material culture. Which is important? Football is important or rules are important? Some can say that football is important because without football we cannot play. But there can be an argument from the camp of non-material culture that what is that thing which is making that sphere as football? The meaning of that, it is a sphere. And if there is no idea of football, there is no idea of the sport behind that, it would look ridiculous that many people or children, they are just pursuing a sphere and they become very happy when they put it in a particular thing which they call it goal, and millions and billions of rupees are spent on this activity and people watch them, people chasing a sphere. So if we have no idea of that this is sport, so all that would be ridiculous. So it means non-material culture gives meaning to objects. The definitions of things, the meanings of things lie in non-material culture. So in this sense, non-material culture is more important than material culture. There have been cultures, ancient cultures, which have been destroyed by nature or through some other their own works. And what happened? We have their material culture preserved in museums. We see the cultures of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in museums, their jewelry and their utensils and their weapons and their instruments. But their non-material culture is gone, and they are gone. So it is non-material culture. One can build material culture if it is gone, if non-material culture is living. But if non-material culture is gone, technology would be gone, knowledge would be gone. You will not be able to build non-material culture, right? So then material culture would be then preserved in museum only. So this also shows that non-material culture is important than material culture. We have a diversity of cultures. There are thousands of cultures in this world. Why cultures vary? Why in Pakistan uh, we have different cultures? In the world, there are so many cultures. So, what determines a particular culture? So, determinants of culture. So, if we discuss determinants of culture, the first factor would be land and geography. The people who are living in mountains, their cultures would be different. Their way of life would be different than people who are living in a desert, for example. People living in an island, their staple food would be fish and the seafood, for example. And the people living in agricultural land, they would be growing wheat, for example. So their economic activities would be different, and their working hours would be different because economic activity would in turn would determine their when they would eat, when they would sleep, their whole life cycle, and their 24 hours, and then other relationships, when they would see their family, the patterns of family. So all that would be determined by their economic activities. So culture is first of all determined by geography and the land. Even their physical features would be determined, maybe their language, because the people who are living in, for example, near sea, they can have different words about sea, and the people who have never seen the sea, they might have no word for it, or just a one word for it, right? So and the animals and plants which are in that particular area, so language would be affected by their vocabulary, and their way of looking at world ultimately would be determined by so there is a territorial dimension of culture, physical dimension of culture. And then there have been men of ideas, history of ideas. People come, prophets came, masters of mankind, Confucius and Lao Tzu, and prophets, Abraham, for example, and Moses. So all these philosophers and prophets and sages and saints, they also they also give a particular shape to a particular community and the people. So ideas and the people of character and people of truth, they also shape the culture. And if we just assume that they come from heaven ideas, so land and heaven, the two are basically the main determinants of culture. So we will continue this discussion inshallah on culture. So please read chapter 3 of your book. Thank you very much.